Welcome to Make Your Mark podcast, where guests share their experiences, insights, and tactics to help you accelerate your business. So building, scaling, and monetizing your business is made easier. And I will be your host, Suthar. Oh my goodness, guys, I have got an exciting guest for us today. Now, I wanted to bring an expert around podcast hosting onto our show so we can talk a little bit more about podcasting itself and the platform that I use and so many others use around the world when it comes to podcasting and having your own show. His name is Alban Brooke, and he is the head of marketing of Buzzsprout. Oh my goodness, Alban, I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kay.
No worries. Now, before we delve in a little bit deeper about podcasting and the hosting and things like that, I have been doing a little bit of research, and a little birdie tells me, Alban, that you have a diverse background. I mean, you was a teacher, a lawyer, come marketer. How did all of that transpire?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think this was very much, it was not like a planned out career path. It was, what's the next thing to do that would be good? So my first few jobs, I actually was mostly working in really small businesses. I feel like it's this kind of the thread. So, I was working for a library, and then I worked for an independent bookstore, and I kept ending up working for people who would just say, hey, there's these problems, and then they would walk away. And so one of my first jobs was, working at a bookstore, which everyone thinks they know what that would mean, but it's where I learned to frame buildings, and I roofed a barn, and I learned to use a jackhammer, and, built thousands of shelves. And it was just like, it was a guy who was this eccentric bookstore owner and had an airplane he was building himself. And any problem he ran into, he'd say, I need someone to figure out how to reorganize this whole section of bookshelves one day. The next day was drive a tractor for me. And I was super fortunate to work for him. And then after school, I decided to move to Haiti and teach school. And my boss there was, he really was just looking for someone to help solve problems as well. So he'd say, hey, here's a classroom of kids and they want to learn English. And he'd walk away. And so I had no training, but I'm going, okay, well, let's get some books. Let's figure out how to learn some teaching materials. Let's try to figure out and self-taught my way into it. And, it kind of just kept continuing. I helped start a law firm. I was the first employee before I decided to go to law school, where it was, again, the same lawyer dropping me in front of a lot of problems. And so that's kind of been the thread, as I try to think about what is the consistent thing. And when I realized that I was not happy in law and that wasn't the career path I wanted to continue in, I was really a big fan of podcasting. And one of my friends was talking about this web application they'd been working on called Buzzsprout. That wasn't all that big. And really, they had no special passion for podcasting. And I was always talking to him, talking this big game. Oh, if you got me an interview, I'd crush it. I would come in there and I'm sure I'd be able to help with the marketing, having no idea what I was getting myself into. And one day, the person who was kind of doing a little bit of marketing said, I think I'm going to go try and do something else. And they moved on. And then he was like, all right, there's going to be, a job opening. And I was like, oh man, I've been saying this for months. I guess now I actually have to go and try to get an interview. And that's how I ended up in Buzzsprout.
Wow, that's an amazing story. And I like the fact that it seemed like every time you had an opportunity to do something, you were just thrown in there and it was up to you to either swim or sink, right? And so I guess that's what podcasting and marketing is like. You're just thrown out there and you've got to be able to find the tools, to find the resources to be able to swim and to really kind of get yourself out there, your voice heard and your message heard, right? And so that's fantastic. Now, tell me a little bit regards to the podcasting side of it and what your thoughts are. I mean, there's so many different forms of content out there. what is it about podcasting for you that really stands out compared to everything else that's going on out there?
Podcasting is one of these, there's two things that make it unique. One is that it accepts that you have a life and you're doing other things with it. So YouTube and TikTok and Netflix and reading a book, they all want 100% undivided attention. And they're saying, you got to look at me. You probably need to listen to me. You need to be fully absorbed. And that's really wonderful when you're in that space where you actually can devote 100% of your attention. But there's a lot of things in our lives, driving, going for a run, being at the gym, doing the dishes, where you have your hands are busy, your eyes are busy, but you're kind of interested in kind of paying attention to something else. And podcasting, by nature of just saying, hey, listen to me, fits in perfectly into those activities. And so it entered into a low competition time of our day where everything else was fighting 100% for that leisure time. Then podcasting came in and said, hey, all these other moments, what if you could listen to cool conversations? And the second piece, beyond just that it allows you to do other things, is a high level of intimacy, because you're unlikely to switch. People stick with podcasts much longer. I've listened to some of my favorites now for 6 years, and you build a relationship with the hosts. You start feeling like you know a lot about them. You know the way they speak sometimes. You know some of the interesting things about their lives. And so you build this deep level of intimacy and trust. So for business leaders or people who are trying to grow a brand, it's a really great way to go deep with a smaller audience and really build a high level of trust.
That is amazing that you mentioned that, because when you think about podcasting, right, especially when I'm going down the gym and people got their earphones in, and I actually ask a lot of people what they're listening to, and it's surprising how many of them are actually speaking to podcasts and not music anymore, right? Because people are just wanting to have the opportunity to learn as much as they can in between while doing things and, washing the dishes, doing the laundry, whatever it may be. So I love that. And the fact that podcasting is so much more diverse, because you don't need to have that 100% attention in front of your face like a book, and you can just listen as you go, right? So you're actually being a lot more productive and it's a lot more effective, especially when using your time. So that is awesome there. Now, the thing is, what I've been hearing, Alban, recently from a lot of different people is they're saying that it's too late to start a podcast. If I was going to go into it, I should have started like 10 years ago. What are your thoughts around that?
So the very first day I ever worked in podcasting was December 16th, 2014. And I went to this little meetup and somebody said, I wish I was starting this podcast now, but I honestly don't even know if I'm going to launch it because it's already saturated. And he was talking about everyone who'd started 3 years before him. Well, in 2014, I think there were maybe 30, 40,000 podcasts out there. Now we're looking at over 4 million. He was in such a low competition environment. And yet to him, all he was looking for was an excuse. And especially when we have these moments where we have to put ourselves out there creatively and we really want to succeed. Like, if you're going to put yourself on video, if you're going to put yourself on audio, if you're going to record something for the world, you really want to show up your best. I know that's how I feel. And the way that kind of manifests in your life is almost like becoming hyper aware of all the roadblocks. I would love to start this, but I don't have the money for $12,000 of equipment. One of the first times I ever spoke on stage, someone said, I only have $10,000 for equipment. And I'm like, I would buy a $60 mic and I'd put the rest in a index fund and move on with your life. What would you ever spend that 10 grand on?
Right.
So when I hear it's too saturated, we could talk about why I think that's not accurate. But the more important thing is, I think that what that is actually happening is that's an excuse. We're just saying, honestly, for me to become comfortable with my own voice is going to be weird. and it's going to be hard. And I'm not really ready for it unless I almost have a guarantee I'll be really good and I'll sound really good. And so we almost are excited when we hear that excuse and we go, yeah, it's already a little saturated, moving on.
Right. Now, I want to go back slightly as to what you mentioned just a few minutes ago as to sounding good, right? Making sure that you actually have valuable content for your audience, for your listeners. Now, when someone is first starting their podcast, and you already mentioned you don't need to have thousands of dollars to start, you just need to get started. What are some of the first things that people need to keep in mind when they're first starting out in podcasting?
So the main channel we use to grow Buzzsprout is content marketing, and I'm starting to develop this idea that all content doesn't need to be at the same production level. Some needs to be super highly produced. Think if you're creating a feature film that you're going to ask people to pay $9 to see in the theaters, that needs to be ultra high end. That's going to be a Avengers movie or something. But then there's other things. And the one I'm working on right now is sometimes just tutorials, teaching a little feature in a product. And that all it really needs to be is like a good Loom video, just like my face in the corner and showing my screen. It's not high end produced. It's a little bit, you catch yourself misspeaking a lot, and it doesn't matter. All that needs to happen is it needs to exist. And the way I think about that is sometimes people just want this thing. They're like, I just wish somebody would tell me how to use this feature. Well, now I will tell you. But how much more value are they going to get if there were special effects and there were robots running around and exploding in the background? There's no more value. So podcasting often, I like to think of, there's so many of these conversations and there's so many things to learn in the world. You kind of only get to learn if you work with or you're friends with somebody who already knows it. Think how many big entrepreneurs, business leaders, they actually go back and in their conversations, they say, is actually working for this person. And they really took me under their wing. And we used to talk about this all the time. And I understood how they learned. But it wasn't a book, because sometimes these books aren't even written. Like there's just knowledge out there. You kind of have to talk to people about it. Well, all of a sudden, we started this thing called podcasting where we are recording all of these one-to-one conversations all the time and putting them out to the world. A lot of them are not great, but a lot of them have incredible value because it's somebody sharing a unique perspective. And I mean like a truly unique perspective. It's one that only they have. They're talking about something super specific. And I think of podcasts like there's one on Buzzsprout about how to start a coin-operated laundry business. And they went through everything that they did to launch multiple. And they were training people, and they kept talking about like, is the production quality high enough? Am I doing a good job with the editing? And I was like, you're in the it needs to exist group. Like we can level up over time. But the fact that this is out there and thousands of people are trying to launch these businesses, and now they've got the like person who's done it talking to them every week, that's insanely valuable. So if you've got that content, then I think allow yourself to not stress out about perfect sound quality. We can talk about how to get that, but you might be in this category that these conversations just need to exist for the people who are actively looking for them.
Right. And I love the fact that you mentioned that Buzzsprout has loads of tutorials, loads of resources, tools for people to actually kind of go through, get themselves out there. And essentially that's what you're saying. Just get it done. Just get your message out there, and then you'll get better as you go on. And now I want to really kind of delve in a little bit deeper regards to Buzzsprout. Now, this is one of the best platforms I've come across, Alban. And I wish someone told me about it from the beginning. I went through different platforms before I even got to Buzzsprout. And when I finally found it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. And it has so many different features, so many things to help podcasters out, all in one platform. So I would love for you to just tell our listeners today a little bit more about Buzzsprout.
Could I speak first to the fact that you say, as soon as you saw it, you knew it was going to work for you, but you went through a lot of other options.
Yeah.
Anyone who's listening to this and is considering, should I launch? Should I get something out to the world? Yeah, marketing is really important. And a lot of times you've got a really good product, you've got a really good business, you've got really good content, and nobody knows about it. And nobody picks you if they don't know about it. It's not Field of Dreams where if you build it, they will come. Like, people just don't show up to your business because they don't know that it exists. And you may actually have a really wonderful business that people would buy from if they knew about it. Yep. And it's really interesting to me now seeing so many businesses kind of like really get awesome at their core business, their product, the thing they're selling. They're a restaurant and they just make the best food and the best experience. And then they say, now we're done. And I go, oh, no, the other half is still there. The other half, which is get this in front of people, figure out how to let them know about it. So all that to say, I just love that, like, you just kind of gave a good case study of, well, I knew, no, this isn't right. No, this isn't right. This doesn't work for me. And if we'd have been able to introduce ourselves to you earlier in the process, we would have saved you that hassle. And the product was ready the whole time. It was the marketing side that hadn't lived up yet. So inside of Buzzsprout, our main goal is we help you get your podcast online and out to the world. We get you into Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and every other place that wants to take podcasts. Every time they launch, we're talking about them, we're learning, and we're helping you get them out to the world. We give you statistics, we give you growth tools, we give you really easy ways to create a website, to embed your podcast on your own site if you already have one. We make it easy for you to start monetizing a podcast. You really get the entire podcast lifecycle with Buzzsprout. And the thing that makes us unique is that we're creating a ton of tutorials. So lots of video tutorials, lots of guides on our blog. And when you run into issues, because you will, we have real people in support who answer almost instantly. Yes. And they're all based in Jacksonville, Florida, with the development team, with most of our team. And it's hard, it's funny. I was talking to someone on the support team. They're saying, it's hard to tell people you're on a support team and what they think is like AT&T phone service is. And I go, I know, but to us, the development team's constantly asking, like, what are you hearing? What's confusing? Okay, let's change that in the app. And they really help lead a lot of the decisions and the way we think about Buzzsprout. So it's an incredible resource. If you are on Buzzsprout, I would really recommend, when you run into issues, reach out to support.
Do you know what? I got excited then when you mentioned about your support, right? Now, this is one of the main things that keeps me sticking around with Buzzsprout and telling everyone about it, because your support is the most incredible service I've ever come across. And I was like, if every business did what your team do, oh my goodness, we'll be living in a perfect world, right? Because not only do I find with you is that with Buzzsprout, you guys are always one step ahead, right? So I don't know what it is that your team does, but the market research that goes behind the scenes, right? You guys are so on point because you're continuously adding more features and the progress and the different things on how podcasting is evolving over the years. You guys are right there. You're launching the next best thing. And I absolutely love that about you. And the service, every time I was stuck, wasn't too sure what to do or how to go about it. And it says, that Buzzsprout will be getting back to you soon. And I'm like, okay, they'll probably get back to me in a day or two. And oh my goodness, you're talking about minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get back to you in minutes. And I'm like, wow, the service is absolutely incredible. And some of the features, oh my goodness, that, the different ways of monetizing your podcast that you have on there. And it makes it so easy for every user, right? It's totally simple, but it does so much. And so one of the things I actually wanted to talk about is you also have a feature on there where you can actually build your podcast website, right? Because there's so many people out there that are, I don't know how to build a website, I'm no good at tech, but you have that all in there. Now, I want to ask you, how did all of this come about and become this fantastic platform for every podcaster to use?
So the origin of Buzzsprout in the late 90s, Tom, one of our co-founders, had this product called Insights. It was just a little website builder. Mm-hmm. And just by nature of who he knew, it really seemed to start out with, it was mostly churches and nonprofits that were using it.
Okay.
In about 2005, 2006, they start reaching out and saying, we just had a board meeting, we record the audio, and I want to get it on my website. And Tom's like, okay, let me figure out how to do that. And then someone else writes in and says, we actually record all the sermons for our church. How do we get those to the people who didn't come to church And then he's like, okay, let me look into this. And as he's doing that, he starts realizing this is actually a thing called podcasting that recently started. And it's pretty complicated. So I'm going to launch it as a separate product. And so that's where the co-founders launch Buzzsprout.
Wow. Amazing.
And by nature of who we were serving, nonprofits, churches, people who are not technically savvy, we started building a product that was very opinionated in the way that it works. So everything had to be dead simple. So when there were these complicated questions like, what bit rate should your audio file be encoded in? What file type should it be delivered in? Should it be an audio or a video podcast? These are all questions that were constantly debated back then. And we said, these are all kind of nerd debates. These aren't really critical for getting your podcast to the world. So we made decisions for all of them. And we said, Buzzsprout will only go with MP3s. We'll only do audio. We'll only do this encoding. And it worked really well for that market. And by serving that market, that ended up, especially when we started leaning into marketing, we started growing. We started seeing like the number of people who were looking for a piece of software that was making a lot of these low-level decisions for them. We just gradually grew into that position in the market, and it ended up being pretty fortunate, and it ended up working out really well for us.
Yeah, I mean, I have been, following Buzzsprout for a long time. Buzzsprout, you guys have an amazing Facebook group, guys. If you're not in the Facebook group, you need to get yourself in there. There's so much information and content on there. But you've got over 100,000 active podcasters now in Buzzsprout. And that's amazing. Now, the thing is not just, people might be thinking, oh, it might not be for people that are just starting out. It's for people that are, entrepreneurs making 6 figures, 7 figures. But that's not the case, is it, Alban?
I mean, no, the podcasting is for anybody that has a message they want to get out to the world. For some people that the churches, that's a religious message. Mm-hmm. For people with a nonprofit, that's, hey, there's a really important thing that needs to be fixed in the world, and I want your help to fix it. For some people, it's sharing the story of living with Parkinson's disease, or somebody who sets up call centers and they're trying to teach people so that they will use them as a consultant. These are all real podcasts on Buzzsprout. It could be a business coach. It could be any type of business, from a single person all the way up to Apple and Google. We've had presidential campaigns. Joe Biden had a podcast with us for a while. Like any level of podcaster, any level of individual who's saying like, I want to just speak and I want to get this out to the world. Buzzsprout will help you do it and help you get that message out to your engaged audience.
Now, I find that a lot of people get stuck, right? Because you mentioned about, having different audiences, whether it's church or about Parkinson's. And marketing is so essential when you're launching and doing a podcast. It's not just about creating a podcast, but making sure, like you previously mentioned, that it's getting out there to the right people. And so what kind of things should podcasters think about and need to do to market their podcast out there and actually stand out from a crowd and their competitors?
It's so easy for people to ignore the marketing side. For a long time, I would say when I joined Buzzsprout, we had the best product and nobody used it. It wasn't until one of our developers went to the very first podcast movement that he realized he only met one customer of ours. And there really were not people using Buzzsprout there. And it was also where he started to realize like, oh, our position in the market is very different. Everybody else is really catering to very technical people, people who are programmers or developers, and they want every little bit of fine control. And we're trying to simplify this process. So we didn't have anyone who wanted to tinker with audio files. We had people who we were really enabling them to get their message out to the world. And as we started to develop an expertise in marketing in-house, we started seeing incredible growth. And it's not that marketing grows the product. Like you have to have both of those together. I would rather have a good product and good marketing than an excellent product and no marketing, or excellent marketing and a bad product. By the way, excellent marketing and bad product, that I think is called a scam. Like you get in front of people, but what you're selling is terrible. But I'd rather these things just be okay together, because they really are, they multiply across the two. They're not additive, they're multiplied. So when you launch a podcast, some people think this is a marketing channel, which it is it could be a marketing channel for a business, but you still are going to have to do work to get it in front of people. So you can do things like paid ads. Buzzsprout has a product called Buzzsprout Ads, where you can run a podcast promotion in other shows to grow your show. You can go into the podcast apps and run ads. You can build a social media profile that is about your podcast, or if you already have one, you can promote your podcast on there. I've seen shows that have grown over millions of downloads primarily just through a single Instagram page that the host is constantly using. There's definitely opportunities for you just to lean into whatever area your audience is hanging out, wherever that they are. Go and serve their needs, so that when they're thinking like, I kind of want to listen to a podcast about this, they already know you exist. It's really about that first step of making sure people know you exist, so there's even an opportunity for them to test out the podcast.
Right. And also there's a feature on Buzzsprout where you can actually create snippets of your episode and actually use that as part of marketing as well, which is great. So you don't need to find anyone else to do this. You can do it all inside the platform, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is pretty popular on a lot of social platforms, where people share a podcast with a little bit of a waveform, so that it's pretty obvious there's something to click on, and people will click and then they can hear maybe a 30-second, 1-minute snippet. And so we built that into Buzzsprout, where if you say, here's the clip that I really think catches people, and now they're going to want to listen, we can help you create a little waveform that you could share out to the world.
Definitely. And I know I've used that as well, and that's a fantastic feature. And also, you can also transcribe your episodes there on the platform as well, and therefore creating blogs and captions for if you want to put it on YouTube and social media, right?
Yeah, transcriptions are really important. I mean, three separate reasons. One, accessibility. People who are deaf or hard of hearing, like often cannot listen to podcasts and can't experience this content. And the automated transcription tools are not perfect. And so if you try to read some, there's just times where it doesn't work. So adding those in is a big accessibility feature. Two, there's people who do not listen, no matter what. My dad will not listen to podcasts. I listen to something that I know he would love. And he'd go, yeah, I don't really listen to podcasts. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But if it has a transcript, he would read it because he's a huge reader. And then third, there's people who just are searching the web and maybe they want something really focused. I would not say podcasting is a great search engine marketing or SEO focused way of creating content, but there are times where you're looking for something that's a really long tail keyword. You know, I want to listen to this economist talking about this concept, and they've never blogged about it. But then when you start searching, you go, oh, he did a podcast episode about it, and there's the transcript. And so it gives people an opportunity to find the content. So we developed a extension to the RSS specification for transcripts at Buzzsprout and launched that. It's open source, so it's now the standard across podcasting. But we want to help more and more podcasters get transcripts out to the world so that we're really helping amplify their content.
Yeah, and you know what's really amazing? I've got to highlight this, is the fact that Buzzsprout has catered for the deaf, for the older generation, right? So if you're not into listen to podcasts, you can read it, you can, go through the captions, you can go through all of these different ways on, basically you've diversified your audience and you're allowing them to also take in the information as well, which is amazing. And again, it's all done on Buzzsprout. Again, I have no idea how you guys have put this together and how this has come off and how you've made this so amazing, but it is a fantastic, fantastic platform to use. Before we end this episode, do you have any last words?
I would just tell everybody, if you are feeling uncomfortable about creating content in any way, I totally see you and I feel you, because when I left law and I started realizing I'm probably going to have to start a podcast, I work for a podcasting company. I didn't want to do it. I hated the sound of my own voice. I just stumbled every time I spoke when I knew I was being recorded. It took me a really long time to get comfortable with seeing my face on camera or learning to speak into a camera rather than speaking to a person. It took the first episode, I gave our editor, I couldn't edit it, and I gave him like so much feedback on all the little ums and ahs to clean up, because just a high level of insecurity. And I think even for people who are really confident, it's not the same. It's not that you're not confident. It's actually that you want to be really good, and you probably have pretty high taste. You understand, like, this doesn't sound great yet, but you don't have the ability to actually create something great in the very beginning, at least that's polished, that sounds perfect, it's edited perfect. So the only way to really get good at this stuff is to actually just do it. And you have to be comfortable putting out 5 episodes that aren't perfect. And over time, your confidence level and your comfort with this medium will grow a ton. And if a year from now you go, oh, those old episodes, they embarrass me, which none of my old episodes actually embarrass me now, even though they're not good. If they ever feel like that, you can always just take them offline later. But I'd recommend commit to 5, YouTube videos or 5 podcasts or 3 blogs or whatever it may be, and then just go do it. And don't judge yourself, because it will be very hard when you judge. But once you get into a little bit of a rhythm, you'll start seeing like it feels really good to share things that are important with you with your audience. And when people start writing back and telling you, this is one of my favorite shows, I get a ton of value from your blog, your YouTube videos help me do this thing in my life, that is so empowering, and it's so such a wonderful feeling. So highly recommend creating content for the internet, even if it's not on Buzzsprout, even if it's not serving a business purpose. It's just really good for you to do as a person.
Fantastic. Now, guys, I urge you, go ahead. If you're thinking about, using podcasting to market your business, and if you have a business where you're, got a service or a product, you should be using podcasting. Go ahead, go to the link in the show notes below. I've put a link in there where you can go ahead and sign up for Buzzsprout, get started, get your content out there. And by using the link below, guess what? You also get an additional bonus of $20 Amazon gift voucher. So go ahead and do that right now. Oh my goodness, Alban, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It was such an honor. And oh my goodness, so many golden nuggets.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.